Hello, my name is Greg Madison, and this is The Living Process. Today, my guest is John Amodeo. He's a very well-known American psychologist. John is a well-read regular contributor to Psychology Today, where he has articles that emphasize a lot of his work in terms of working with shame, working with couples, working with intimacy. And we talk about some of these things. Also, we touch on his background in spirituality and how he first came into focusing, partly because of his interest in meditation, and how he worked with John Wellwood and other well-known people that sort of are right at that intersection between focusing and spirituality. We speak a little bit about how he works with couples in a way that enables them to communicate more openly and vulnerably with each other. We speak a bit about shame and where it comes from in a person's life, how to work with it, and how to distinguish the kind of shameful addition to other feelings that we might have in the body, and to be able to work with those as two separate experiences rather than having them kind of lodged together in some way. We also touched upon the importance of being able to receive the gift of attention from another person, compliments from another person, kind of positivity that actually would affirm us if we allowed ourselves to receive it. I was struck by sort of the very clear discernments that John makes in sort of the relational dynamics that we can probably all recognize when he describes them. And I found the conversation really enriching, at times quite affecting. Yeah, I really very much appreciated it, as I think you can tell in our goodbye to each other. So here it is, The Living Process, and John Amodeo. Okay, very nice to be with John Amodeo today. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, pleasure to be talking with you. And um, I want to first of all acknowledge that, I mean, you've done a lot in the field of psychology. I know you have a very popular article in Psychology Today. You've written a number of books, um, and done a lot of other things as well. But first of all, what I normally ask people, and I'd like to ask you, is how you got into focusing, how you kind of came across Gendlin or got into the whole focusing world.
Mm, good question. You're testing my memory.
Aha.
I'd say we're talking about the late 1970s.
Okay.
And that's when I did my doctoral dissertation on the complementary effects of focusing and meditation.
Oh, I didn't know you'd done that.
Yeah,
Interesting.
with the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, they're now called Sophia University.
Okay.
Yes, I've always been interested in meditation, lived in the New York Zen Center for a year in 1973. And yeah, came across focusing in my studies. And actually, the way I've encountered it is I met Eugene Gendlin at a philosophy conference where we were both presenting. And we met in the lunchroom. And he led me through a focusing session during lunch.
Wow.
Yeah. So I thought it was intriguing, interesting. And then I noticed John Wellwood was teaching focusing workshops in San Francisco, where I was living. I was born in Brooklyn, raised in New York and Long Island, and then moved to California to go to the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. Really great program. So yeah, I met John Wellwood, and I learned focusing from him first, and then I really loved it. And was having lunch with John Wellwood and Eugene Gendlin once after writing my dissertation. And Gene, I told him I was really interested in Buddhism and spirituality. So you have to meet Ed McMahon and Peter Campbell. These are Catholic priests who, at the time, he told me they've taken focusing beyond where I've taken it. I think he might have changed his mind about that later. But he really encouraged me to study with them, and I did. I contacted them, did their workshops, began to assist them in their workshops, and they certified me as a focusing coordinator way back then. I kind of let that lapse and got demoted to a focusing trainer. So that's my official title now. So I didn't want to do all the work that a focusing coordinator needs to do, but that's another story. So yeah, so then I tapped John Wellwood to be my dissertation advisor, which was again on focusing and meditation as complementary processes. So yeah, it's been great, and I use it now. I've been marriage and family therapist here in California for 44 years, I guess now. So I use it in my practice when appropriate. I don't always use focusing with everyone. Some people just need to talk, but then I bring it in strategically when it feels right. So that's maybe a longer answer than you were hoping for, but that's my history with focusing.
Yeah, not at all. It raises more questions for me. The first thing I want to say is when I think about the things I know from your work in psychology, especially the book Being Intimate that you wrote some time ago, I have often recommended that to couples. I thought it was such a fantastic book. Really, really enjoyed it. But when I look over a lot of things that you've done since then as well, it's the impression I get is that a lot of it is kind of in the relational space. Not always necessarily maybe working with couples, but at least sort of relational experience and the problems and disruptions that come up there and how to kind of work through them. But before we get to that, can I just ask a question about, whether that's right or wrong? You might dispute that. But before we get to that, can I just ask a question about your dissertation?
Sure.
I'm curious what you kind of found in your comparison between focusing and meditation. Did you come to any sort of realizations about how they may go together or may not go together?
Yeah, I found meditation is a great thing to do before focusing because it kind of stills, quiets the mind, and there's easier access to the whole inner world of our feelings, what we need, what we want in our life. I guess to put it in a nutshell, one of the differences is focusing deals with more content. Like one way I write about it is, when meditation teachers were first teaching, they would say, oh, feelings come, let them go, just let them go. Yeah. And then, the meditation teachers were realizing that people were using that for spiritual bypassing. And I talked about that in my dissertation, how people bypass their feelings often. And then so they changed their tune. They said, okay, feelings come, just let them be. Allow them, don't fight them, don't have aversion to them. Aversion is one of the things that creates suffering for us. So just notice them, let them come, let them pass like clouds in the sky on a windy day. And then when focusing came along, I added a third piece to that, the third piece is let them unfold. So you take time to be with the feeling. Notice how it feels in your body. That's the difference with focusing. You take time to be with the feeling. Recognize it has some wisdom, some intelligence, some message for us if we can get quiet enough to tune in and listen. Well, what is this telling me about my life? Some important message here. So focusing involves more embracing, we call it embracing the content, what's going on in our life, what's getting in the way of feeling at peace right now, what's getting in the way of feeling good. And we allow that. We're curious about it. We open to it. Well, okay, let me just sit with this and be with it in a focusing kind of way. And things begin to unfold, the layers of the onion. The first we might notice we're angry, for example. Then we allow that. And then beneath that, we might notice we're sad or we're grieving. And there's something more vulnerable underneath that we learn how to embrace and be with. And that could be like a segue into relationships. Because in relationships, people aren't connected to what they're really feeling. They're in their head, they're in their judgments, their accusations, their analysis of the other person, blaming, criticizing, shaming the other person, which is really destructive to yourself and to the relationship. And it doesn't allow for the kind of, it doesn't create the climate for the intimacy that we're longing for. Where to create that climate, through focusing is so powerful. We just drop down. Okay, what am I feeling? And just take some time and be with something. And it's usually kind of vulnerable. And we grow up, of course, thinking being vulnerable means being weak. So often we have a lot of shame around being vulnerable. So it takes courage, takes strength to be mindful of how we're really feeling and really honor that. And then we have something deeper to share with others but maybe I get a little ahead of myself here. But yeah, focusing is a great, segue into intimacy.
That's really interesting, because if I say that back to you I guess the thing that strikes me is it's almost as though the meditative start brings about something kind of similar to clearing a space in a way. And then within that, rather than just noticing, but letting go of feelings, you then take that turn that I was suggesting seems fundamental to your work, in my view. You take that turn into relationship with oneself. And it sounds like what you're saying is, if you can be in relationship with your own experiencing, your own feelings, then your relationship with other people potentially is deeper.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a quote from Bodhidharma. He's one of the third Zen patriarch. Let's see if I can get it to you exactly. Um, yeah, he said, Zazen is the practice of becoming intimate with oneself.
Mm-hmm.
So I see meditation is intimate with yourself. Um, and the same could be said with focusing, being present to life as we're experiencing it from the inside from moment to moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings aliveness into our relationships. So yeah, whether we're talking about meditation, focusing, they're both directing our attention inside to what we're feeling. I mean, not in a narcissistic way, in a way where it's really about self-care, self-awareness, mindfulness of what we're actually experiencing. So then we have something deeper to bring to our relationship. And it's not easy, it's a lifelong process. I'm still working on it. It's nothing we ever achieve, and totally. And now we're just clear sailing for the rest of our life. It takes ongoing awareness.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a skill to feel it.
What's that?
It's a skill that is constantly in process of developing.
Yes, a skill of living with failure.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, having the humility to not be paralyzed, not be paralyzed by shame when we fail at something, but realizing that's a step toward learning something and growing and deepening, because we're all failing constantly. And it's
That's something I wanted to ask you a little bit about, is your work on shame, because there was a period of time that you were doing workshops in the focusing world on shame. And I'm just wondering kind of how you came into that work and sort of what's the deeper significance of that and how you worked with it in a focusing way.
yeah, it's such a pivotal thing. Shame is see, how does Brene Brown define it? Shame is the feeling that we're flawed and defective, and therefore it's a very extremely painful feeling
Yeah.
that we're flawed and defective and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. And it's so painful. We want to avoid it. That shame, that humiliation, it's just so painful. We just learn to push it away, deny it, suppress it, avoid it at all costs. But if we work openness, some friends and colleagues of mine, Brett Lyon and Sheila Rubin, just released a book with Sounds True called Embracing Shame.
Yeah.
A lot of people feel shame, they want to get rid of it. But that's not the way to really work with it in a skillful way. We need to open to it and embrace it. So I came across it first with John Bradshaw. So I forgot how I stumbled into him, but I heard some of his talks. I ordered all kinds of bunch of his tapes and I started sharing them with my clients. I really benefited from it. Just when we catch on to shame, it's really powerful because it suddenly helps us realize, oh, I have shame, but I am not the shame. The shame got conditioned in me from how oftentimes the toxic shame is the conditioning that we grew up with, all the messages we internalize that we're not good enough, smart enough, good
Hmm.
looking enough,
Hmm.
from our parents, our teachers, our peers on the playground, on the baseball field. And if you're not good at something, you're the last one picked for the team. It's so humiliating. Unfortunately, I was good at baseball and I wasn't good at other sports, but the kids didn't pick on me so much because I was good at baseball. So
Yes. You
I
just
still got
need
my,
one thing, don't you, that kind of
yeah,
saves.
yeah, yeah, baseball and bowling, I was pretty good.
Okay. I want to stick with that a little bit longer. It's as you're describing it, I'm thinking there's something about those messages that become so much a part of one's identity that it can be very difficult to get that kind of space in order to kind of be with it or to have it rather than to feel like I am it.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, what can I say about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, which again, focusing is helpful for because a lot of what focusing is about is finding the right distance between us and whatever we're feeling, whatever we're experiencing. So being in the body is one way to work with it. Just really being able to self-regulate, self-soothe, just just really fully honoring ourselves, honoring what we're feeling. And shame is part of oftentimes what we're experiencing, what we grew up with. So if we can realize, oh, yeah, I got that message, that I'm not good enough, the repeated messages from our father. And I got a lot of shaming from my father. My mother was a saving grace. She was very warm and kindly most of the time. Not perfect, but really good mother. But yeah, I know what it's like to be shamed a lot by a parent. It's so toxic. It can be really debilitating. And we can grow up with a really low sense of self-esteem, self-worth, which was, true for me. I really had to work on that to begin to value myself more as I am. Yeah.
If you can I ask if I guess as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, is there anything special about working with shame rather than other bodily feelings? And the one thing I'm wondering about is if when you're working with shame in the body, is it because a lot of the things you were just saying resonate for me and probably for a lot of people, parents or peers in the past can be very cruel, sometimes unintentionally and sometimes not. Um, but when now, like later on in adult life, when you come up with those experiences of shame, is it your experience that um, when the feeling of shame is there, that there is also in some way another part that is continuing that shaming process from the past?
Yeah, I think we internalize a narrative. Oh yeah, I am defective. Something's wrong with me. I'm not worthy of love. Love
Yeah.
is not for me. I'll often hear clients say, and they just kind of give up. This kind of with depression maybe sets in. So shame can be foundational for anxiety, for depression,
Yeah.
and it's been often called the master emotion. Um, yeah, and it's also been called a binding emotion. And shame is so pivotal; it binds with our other emotions. So, for example, we're sad about something, a relationship breaks up, or a friend tells, "Oh, you should be over that by now. It's been a month or it's been a year."
Mhm.
And the shame kicks in and binds with the grief, like, oh, there's something wrong with me for feeling this. Okay, I got to push it away, and that just guarantees that the grief's just going to continue. Our
Yeah.
suffering's going to continue because we're not taking time just to notice the grief, the sadness. It's okay. Doesn't mean you're weak. Doesn't mean something's wrong with you. Just let the feeling be there for as long as it wants to be there. And if you can be with it in a kind and gentle way, I mean, my teachers, Ed and Pete, would often talk about caring, feeling presence. Just be with it in a caring, feeling way, and it tends to pass. Like Carl Rogers famously said, when we can accept ourselves just as we are, then we can change.
Yeah.
Not fix ourselves, change ourselves, be with what is, and life begins to unfold. So yeah, it binds with grief, it binds with sadness, it binds with anger. We can't do anger, especially women grow up with that message. It's not ladylike to be angry.
Hmm.
And so we learn so shame binds with the emotion and we get frozen. So we
Hmm.
have to kind of do some microsurgery, separate the shame from the actual feeling that we're having and realize, oh, that's shame operating. When people catch on to that, it's pivotal. It's
Yeah.
transformative. Oh, that's shame. That's not me. That's something I internalized. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds really, really helpful. And I like that word binding because I can just imagine that there's a vulnerable feeling and then this shame kind of slumps on top of it. And it just becomes a morass of a feeling until you realize that there's actually two places there, a vulnerable place and a part that has internalized these negative sort of this negative self-image or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. These negative messages that we
Yeah,
internalize and then we come to believe them.
exactly.
There's saying that I like, don't believe everything you think.
Yeah. That's a good one to remember.
It's often our thoughts are destructive, toxic, self-negating.
Yeah. And I guess one of the things you can notice is just the impact of the thought. If it brings shame, then that probably is a thought that isn't helpful in some way, probably isn't true, and might not even be yours.
Right, exactly. Maybe internalized. So, yeah, my book, The Authentic Heart, I distinguish between the inner critic and shame. The inner critic are often the thoughts.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm something wrong with me. I'm never going to find love. I'm defective. And the shame is the felt sense, the feeling of,
Hmm.
as John Paul Sartre said, it's that immediate shudder that runs through me from head to toe,
Yeah.
like the contraction. You can bodily feel it if you open to it. It's very painful. So we don't want to merge with that pain. We want to have some space from it. Just notice it, let it be. And
Yeah. I think that um, kind of the recognition of how those two come together, the inner critic and the shame, is incredibly helpful.
mm,
I'm I'm wondering if what I said about your work earlier on, if that resonated for you, that a lot of it, because I'm still getting that sense from you, that a lot of it is very relational.
yes, yeah. I started my journey with I grew up in Buddhism when I was in college, 18, 19, I stumbled onto Buddhism, Hinduism. So I started with, meditation and I was actually a yoga teacher for 10 years and
Okay.
contributing editor for the Yoga Journal, really got into yoga
Mm.
and so spirituality was my first love, Taoism, Buddhism. And then I realized, well, it's so easy to bypass feelings. I was really good at that for a long time, probably still am to some extent. Hopefully, I've made progress on that front. But yeah, spirituality involves embracing our feelings. Um, there's a quote from Jack Cornfield that I really love. I can remember it exactly. How did he say it? Free is not free from feelings, but free to feel each one and let it move on, unafraid of the movement of life. Freedom isn't free from feelings, but free to feel each one. So I
Mhm.
was really lucky in college. I got involved in what's called sensitivity groups. I was trained to actually be a leader of sensitivity groups, where the whole thing was to be open to your feelings, recognize what you're feeling, be attuned to that. And, at that point, I guess I was 19 or so. I didn't know what feelings were. And I was just quiet in most of the group. I was too shy, too much shame to say anything. I figured I might say something wrong and really blow it. But I absorbed a lot and began to open to feelings, be a little more vulnerable with my friends. I remember talking to one friend about relationship breakup, and I started actually crying with him. And I thought, wow, I've never done that before with anyone. And that was powerful. So I realized, I was kind of on a dual path.
Mhm.
You know, I focused my friends who were into feelings, they would dismiss the meditators as, navel gazers, narcissists. And then my my feeling friends would think, oh, spirituality, feel spirituality, that's woo-woo stuff. That's ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense. It's crazy. They dismiss spirituality. So I never quite, found many people who wanted to integrate the two. But over time, people were more interested in integrating, the feeling life, opening to our feelings and needs with spiritual practice. And that's why I did the dissertation, which, kind of got distilled later into a book I wrote called Dancing with Fire, A Mindful Way to Loving Relationships. That's kind of a distillation in the in written and popular, people can actually read it. It's not technical.
Hmm.
The importance of integrating our feeling life with our meditation practice, our spiritual practice, and also bringing attachment theory into it as well. That, suffering caused by attachment or non-attachment is an important question, I think. Some people try to detach from their feelings, and I think that's the spiritual path, and the path of detachment. But actually, that kind of detachment is what's often creating suffering. We have aversion to our feelings, our emotions. So, attachment theory is probably, most people are listening, are familiar with, the importance of early connection with a loved one, a parent, a caregiver. We feel a safe, secure connection. We need that in our life. And, we don't have that. Sometimes people flee into spiritual practice when they've never had that secure connection. It can be like a safe refuge. So we just retreat to a meditation cushion every time an uncomfortable feeling comes up or something in a relationship that's distressing, some kind of conflict. We go to a meditation cushion. It's kind of an escape. It doesn't have to be. We can use the meditation to get quiet, get clear what we're really feeling, and then bring that to the relationship. But sometimes it's an avoidance. So yeah, integrating attachment theory with spiritual practice, and focusing is a key part of that book and my work.
And I'm curious, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I can see now how you came up with your dissertation topic. It sort of brought together two sides of you in some way. And in my experience, at least, it seems a little unusual that someone interested in spirituality in the way that you were, and Buddhism and meditation, is interested in not wanting to dismiss the world of feelings and finding a way of being with them. I'm curious how you moved into working with couples, because I think as a psychologist, I'm probably not the only one that can find working with couples, and even working with couples in a focusing and listening kind of way, to be quite a challenge at times. And I'm wondering sort of what you learned about that, or how if you found a way of doing it.
Yeah, yeah. Often things that come up with couples is, they're so attached to being right.
Hmm.
They're kind of in their heads, and they're really very skilled at analyzing, judging their partner, but not very skilled at dropping down into their felt experience
Yeah.
and being more vulnerably present with what they're feeling. So yeah, and I use focusing to varying degrees depending on the couple, their capacity to access what they're feeling. Sometimes I will work with one part of the couple while the
Mhm.
other's listening to help them get more connected to what they're really feeling inside. Then they can bring that to the other person. So yeah, there's different ways focusing can be brought in.
Can I
Um,
just ask, just because you mentioned this, which I think is a real common issue, um, how do you help people to kind of, it's such a general question, there may not be a general answer, but I'm curious how we can sort of help people who are in a couple and the initial stance is just what's wrong with the other person. It's
the
like
initial, the initial stances.
is what's wrong with the other
Yeah,
person.
yeah, exactly right.
And if only that other person would stop doing this or start doing that, then the relationship would actually work well. And it's just the other person is really the problem. If you could please fix them, then we could walk out and everything would be fine. I'm actually okay. And how you kind of make that turn into a person becoming, I guess one of the resistances to the turn is like the person doesn't want to accept that they may be a part of Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God, no, me? I'm
Exactly.
fine.
And how you, I mean, if I guess if there is kind of a sensitive and elegant way of encouraging someone to notice their experience as an important part of the story somehow.
Well, that's where shame often comes in. People have so much shame they don't want to acknowledge that they may have a pivotal role in the problem in the relationship. They may be doing something, saying something, and
Yeah.
so yeah. Well, what I try to do at first is make a connection with each person. I've been influenced a lot by Sue Johnson's work, emotionally focused therapy with couples. So we integrate that. I actually co-wrote a chapter with Sue Johnson in one of her books that she edited. It's called the EFT Casebook on Buddhism and EFT, how they work
Mm.
together.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to bring the I've done some workshops too with EFT supervisors where we bring focusing and EFT to actually some of the focusing international conferences we presented together. Some of that. So yeah, to bring some of her work in, make a connection with each person so they have a secure attachment with me, hopefully, because there needs to be that relational part. I mean, Gendlin will say too, relationship first,
Hmm.
right? Try to make a connection with each person so we have some trust together before we dive into helping them notice what they might be feeling, what their role may be.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know the EFT model well enough. I'm wondering if you could say something about how you integrate focusing into it.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, a key part of the emotionally focused therapy work is helping people see that they're in this cycle together. So Sue Johnson often say the problem isn't you or you or the other person. It's the cycle you get into. When you're for example pursue a distancer dynamic could be a cycle. The more you pursue him, or let's say it's a heterosexual couple, when you pursue him, the more he runs away and resists and feels attacked and hurt, and then the more he distances, the more you pursue, and you get into this bad cycle. So how do we break the cycle? Well, we try to slow the process way down, pausing. Like one of the key things in focusing is pausing. Let's pause here a moment and what's happened. So sometimes I'll point out the cycle that they get into. He's doing this, and then she reacts in this way, and let's try to work with the cycle that you both get into and see how we might enter that cycle to change it. What can we each do that's a little bit different?
Mhm.
Listening, for example, might be one of the steps. Listening is often hard to do when we have an urgent need that we want to express. We want to be heard so badly that it's hard to pause long enough to really hear the other person. So I try to slow things down. I'll reflect a lot. I'll repeat back what I'm hearing, maybe in different words, see if that resonates or not with them. Sue Johnson does that a lot in the EFT. So what's it? I think what I'm hearing is this. Am I getting that right or not? And maybe use different words that they're not quite getting to, which is again different than focusing, because in focusing, the traditional focusing, at least we repeat back their words. We don't add any of our own stuff. But I
Mhm.
find it can facilitate the process if we're tuning it to do our own focusing
Yeah.
as a therapist. And I'm getting a sense that this might be what's going on. It sounds like maybe some I wonder if some shame is coming up, and they'll explain maybe to him, for example, what shame is.
Mhm.
Like when she's crying and hurting, you seem to want to come in and you want to kind of fix it, make it better because you care about her. You don't want her to suffer. So reframing can be part of it. And am I getting that right? And so you're trying to explain why you did what you did, so
Mhm.
that she would be disabused of holding on to this grief and sadness. But that's probably not helpful right now. And what she really needs is for you to just be present, just be with her. I mean, that's really a loving thing to do. That's actually one of the most loving things, is really listening, being present for another person, and then she'll feel heard. And and when we get to that, things actually just shift. If he can, let's say in this example, he can slow down and really listen, be present, realize, oh yeah, if something inside me feels like I'm flawed, I did something bad, I'm bad because I did that or said that. Well, we all make mistakes. It's okay, it's okay just to notice, there's some shame around that, right? That you're a little embarrassed, you feel bad that you did that. And you actually you don't want to see yourself as somebody who can hurt your partner, because you love your partner, care about her. and and be really, really gentle, really soft with that tender place. And people often they'll, yeah, I guess that is what's going on. And we have to repeatedly visit it, of course, because the shame, I call it like the Hydra, the many-headed monster. As soon as you lop off one head, two more heads appear. So,
It's interesting when you describe that, the title of that, the couples book that you wrote keeps coming back to me, being intimate, because the level of intimacy you describe is, it is a very kind of very open, vulnerable depth of intimacy. And I guess I wonder, on the one hand, how many couples have that? And on the other hand, if there's couples maybe that think they don't want that, or or can't sustain it, or it's too, and again, I imagine this touches on the sense of worthiness, it's too, somehow um too open, too exposed,
right, too tender.
too tender, yeah, too
Yeah,
raw. Yeah.
yeah, people are not used to.
Hmm.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I think most people don't have that depth of intimacy and connection, often through no fault of their own because of how we grow up. It's not a culture that supports intimacy and, it
Yeah.
supports achieving things and being smart, making money, having power. It doesn't reward intimacy, although the reward of intimacy is so powerful. I think there's some part, it's the way I'd say it is some part of people have aversion to it. They're not familiar with it. It makes them squirmy inside. And
Hmm.
another part of them, desperately longs for intimacy because that's how we're wired. We need connection.
Hmm.
We thrive with that kind of deeper connection. So the very thing we want, we've been conditioned to not have. But the good news is we can do the inner work to create a climate within ourselves that makes it safe for intimacy to thrive.
Yeah.
And we're beginning to taste it. It's people want more of it. I mean, not
Yeah.
in a clingy kind of way or craving it. It just creates more suffering, but in a way of just really allowing it, noticing it. And a lot of this, this could be a good segue into the art of receiving, another theme that I write
Yes.
about. And
Yeah. Can you say something about that? That sounds good.
yeah, yeah, I had it's one of the I have a column with Psychology Today online. I have like over 140 free articles people can access without having to sign up for anything. And several of them are on receiving, the art of receiving. It's, often we grow up with the belief that it's more noble to give than to receive. It's, selfish, self-centered to receive. And so I mean, giving's fine. We can certainly use more of that in our narcissistic world. Being caring and loving and attentive to others is great. But often we have a block to receiving, me included. It's not always easy for me to receive a compliment or a gift, or, we'll dismiss it.
Hmm.
For one reason, we want to be in control. When we're receiving, we're more vulnerable. We don't want to be vulnerable, because it opens us to a more tender place. Oh, gee, wow, you were thinking of me. You brought me that nice gift. Or I give one example, and one of my articles was in the Psychology Today magazine on receiving. Why is it so hard for us? I give an example of, this gentleman was opening the door for me when I was going into the post office. So I quickly just kind of grabbed it and said, no, you go first. And then afterwards, I was kind of amused with my inability to receive his kind gesture, just automatically not allowing myself to receive that. So it was kind of amusing to me to realize that. So it's all these blocks, just to letting in his kindness. And if we don't let in people's kindness, if we're not able to receive a compliment or a gift or some random act of kindness, it's actually a rejection of the other person because it feels good to give. And if we're a society of people who are busy giving all the time and nobody's available to receive, then what good is the giving? Nobody's there to receive it. So to receive it is actually a gift to the giver. You're giving them something. You're giving them your openness. You're giving them your gratitude. And often people can feel that you're receiving them, and it feels good to them that, oh, a graciousness, a kindness. Oh, well, thank you. That feels good. And So I try to do that more now if somebody gives me a compliment. So after this talk, if anyone wants to compliment me, I'm fine with that. I can receive it. If you like the interview, please let me know. If you don't like it, don't blame me, but blame Greg for inviting me onto the program.
Don't blame me. Don't blame me. Um,
Bad joke, bad joke. I'm known for my bad jokes. Sorry.
um, I find that really, I mean, that I find that quite touching what you've just described because of, I just, I feel on the one hand, for me, I guess, how many little gestures of giving I dismiss, and sometimes dismiss, maybe out of a mistaken guise of um, kind of not wanting to take it, as though it's sort of more generous not to take the compliment, which is ridiculous, and sometimes doubting the sincerity of the offering the gift or whatever in some way. But even
Right.
your example of the door, um, again, I feel like if you say thank you very much and walk through the door, there is a moment of connection.
Exactly.
Yes, but also I'm thinking maybe part of our reluctance to receive is just avoiding that contact.
Exactly. Yes, I think so. Yeah, we're often it's kind of new. It's often, we don't know what to do with it.
Hmm.
That kind of kindness that someone shows us. We don't know what to do with that. And we don't or we think we don't deserve it. That could be another part. We're not deserving of love and kindness.
Or we have
And
to give something back then to make it equal.
yes, exactly. We're obligated. There's strings attached to this. Somebody gives us something. Oh, now, someone says, I love you. We have to immediately say back, oh, I love you too, without really receiving. So, I would encourage people, someone says, I love you, like your partner, say, for example, don't quickly say back, I love you too. Just take a moment, pause, drop into your body. Well, how does it feel to receive that? Can you let yourself feel that? And then maybe later you can reciprocate. But love is a free gift. There's no obligation to have to give anything back. That's the nature of a gift. You're not obligated. Just let it in.
I'm just sitting with that.
What
I'm
do you
I'm noticing I'm noticing um, when you talk about, I totally agree with you, and yet I'm really imagining along with you as you describe the situation of like a partner saying, I love you, and not immediately saying it back, which I wouldn't want to do because it wouldn't feel true, because I wouldn't even be feeling anything about them. I would be at least in the shock of what has just been said to me. So it takes a while to process that. But I would be thinking, what's happening to my partner if I don't say that back right away?
Yeah, with so much wanting to be like a caretaker for the other person. Oh, I got to protect them, protect their feelings. But people are stronger than we think usually.
Yeah.
So yeah, so to be with that deliciously squirmy feeling of someone just saying "I love you," it can be wonderful practice. Just notice how uncomfortable you are. And that's front and center. Then notice that, and just be with that. That could be your doorway into finally letting it in gradually, or maybe later you'll let it in when you sit with it again.
Yeah, it's interesting because I find myself again wondering, oh my goodness, what happens to my partner if I show the squirminess that comes in me in response to that declaration?
It might be a delicious moment of intimacy.
It might be.
Or you can talk about, hey, when you say you love me, I'm really practicing letting it in. And for me to let it in, I don't want to feel obligated to immediately respond. No obligation, no pressure to have to respond, and just let it in. Would you be okay with that? And same with you. If I share something kind with you, feel free to just let it in. You don't have to say anything. But that's one of the problems. We get into our head too much, all these calculations, and we overthink it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
It's just going to play out if I do this or if I don't do this. Just relax, be yourself.
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking if there's a therapist there, it's a little bit easier.
Ah, in a session, you mean?
Yeah,
Yes.
having a third person there takes some of the intimacy away.
Ah, be a little bit of a buffer, maybe a little more of a safe setting.
Exactly.
Therapists can kind of monitor the interaction and make sure it stays safe and connected. And
Yeah,
yes, that's a
exactly.
great place to practice for people to do couples therapy, to be with someone you feel safe with, and you can help monitor the communication, help monitor criticisms and judgments that inevitably creep into every relationship, and
Right.
try to I bring John Gottman's work in sometimes, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, the four things that tend to lead toward divorce: criticism, contempt, stonewalling, and defensiveness. So I try to monitor those things in the couple session as well, and point things out. If things come across as critical, as well, maybe there's another way to say. I think what I'm hearing you say, when you say blah 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 in a critical way, that that there's a hurt place in you, or there's a sadness in you about this. And is that right? Am I hearing that right? And just try to get to the underlying, what underlies the defensiveness.
Yeah. And would you do um, kind of sort of specific experiential work in a couple session, like on receiving and really letting something come in? Would you sort of almost coach in a way?
Yeah, like, how does it feel when she, gave you that compliment? How was that for you? Try to slow it down, pause, and, see what that can be received, or what gets in the way. That could be a great thing to focus on. What gets in the way of receiving. That's a great thing to focus. Maybe it's shame or not feeling worthy, or feeling like, oh, if I let that in, I'm going to be really vulnerable. I mean, this is what happens oftentimes. Can I afford to let myself be vulnerable and let that in? Because I might be attacked the next minute, or
Hmm.
what's the next day. So, it takes building a climate of safety too, to be able, so it's a gradual process of letting in those compliments, those gifts, and being able to trust it, and being able to process when things get off the rails.
Hmm. Do you work with individuals as well?
Yeah, mostly individuals actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just curious.
Yeah, working with couples, like I said, it takes more intensive,
Yeah.
constant focus, and it's it's more complex, put it that way.
What is kind of your current passion? Is there something that you're working on or something that you're most excited about at the moment?
The thing I'm most excited about is when I spend time in Thailand. I haven't been there like in 5 years, but I went in December for a couple of weeks, and the culture, people are smiley and kind and friendly. It's just a really warm, inviting culture to be in.
Mm-hmm.
I know it doesn't really answer your question, but
That's one answer, definitely. Yeah.
self-care is an important thing that I try to focus on. I'm semi-retired, my 70s now, and just want to take more time. But although I tend to be, I still see maybe 10 clients a week or so.
Hmm.
Just got a pretty perfect for me.
Yeah.
And so building self-care into my life, my work, taking time to take walks and meditate, or be with my partner, or just relax. And
Yeah. I wanted to just go back to the meditation question one last time. Um, I know that there's quite a few people that are Buddhist practitioners and focusers. It's not so uncommon, that combination. And it could be that people do it in many different ways. Um, I'm curious for me, not knowing Buddhist practice well, I'm curious about in focusing, and partly I've had a conversation with a couple of other people that have the same combination as you, I'm sure, in their own way. But this topic has kind of come up. And it's just that in focusing, we bring our awareness to a particular feeling and we develop a relationship with that, as we've been discussing. And that, you know, can be the core place from which we can develop further relationships in the world in a deeper, more intimate kind of way. So it has that kind of psychological and personal and interpersonal importance.
Hmm.
But what we don't often do, I think, in the focusing world is we don't pay very much attention to awareness itself.
Hmm.
We bring this kind of openness or awareness or space in order to be able to be with rather than identified with a feeling. So we can relate to it and it can process itself in some way. But I'm wondering if, first of all, if you would agree with that characterization that there's also, we look in one direction kind of. We don't often, I don't think, take the step back and look at the awareness itself and become curious about, well, what is this, the thing that we're calling presence or awareness or space? What is that? And what is the uh, significance of that, maybe?
Yeah, I think there are two things. One is the focusing may not emphasize the awareness of awareness itself, and focusing often doesn't emphasize when you are in like a place where there's been like a felt shift and there's an openness, just dwell in that openness, in that space without any content.
Yeah,
I think it was John Wellwood who used the word in focusing, it can lead to what's called content mutation. Like you're going from one content to an, okay, what can I focus on next?
yeah, exactly.
Let that go and just be in that open place. Be in your be in your body, be with that spaciousness.
Yeah,
And often people find that disorienting just to open to the spaciousness. Like, oh, people feel like they're adrift, maybe, or ungrounded or something. But if you stay in your body, you tend to be more grounded. Just be in that open space and just dwell in that beautiful, rich. I mean, that's what people call spiritual presence or spirituality is about opening. In Buddhism, they call it emptiness,
hmm
emptying yourself of content.
hmm
And, some people, who don't understand Buddhism see that, well, that sounds nihilistic, it's denying life. No, it's opening to life, deeper, rich connection with life itself. You're dwelling in that pure awareness, consciousness of conscious. You're aware of your consciousness. There's a Hindu, Sat Chit Ananda is Hindu words that awareness, consciousness, and bliss. Awareness of your consciousness and the bliss that comes from being aware of your consciousness.
yeah.
Sat Chit Ananda.
Mhm. Yeah, I recognize that kind of experience. I'm curious. I mean, it just reminds me how Gene used to often say, but I don't know how often we kind of really do it. He used to often say that if you have a felt shift, just stay with it. Don't move on. Don't rush on to the next thing. Fully have it. And I certainly have found in myself, if I remind myself of that, that a shift can go deeper and deeper into like a kind of a more and more spacious kind of experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. Great exploration. Yeah. Just
Mm.
open when something shifts and carry that through your day as best you can, that openness. So you're not just, okay, this is time set aside for focusing and this is meditation. You carry that awareness throughout your day, into your life, into your relationships. Smile at the cashier, the post office clerk, people you encounter. Bring that aliveness, that presence, that kindness into your life, into your relationships. It's a
Yeah.
great way to live.
Yeah. And to let that shift become its own avenue in some way, rather than, as you're saying, quickly looking for the next trouble to focus on.
We tend to do that,
Yes, I
I think
know.
that's how brain works. As I have a negativity bias, the way the amygdala works, the limbic system, we're we're poised to scan for danger
Yeah.
so that we can avoid getting eaten by a tiger out there. It's genetic, it's historically built into our genes, avoid danger, look for danger.
hmm
But I think the evolutionary direction, I love Teilhard de Chardin's work, the evolution toward higher consciousness is, well, let's open up. Maybe we are safe and we can afford to relax and be present to life as it unfolds. And
Yeah.
relax when good things happen, and we can receive that and let that in, let that nourish us. Because basically, we are the Buddha nature. We are presence, we are love. If we can let all the other stuff settle down, get in touch with our basic nature, that's what we are: pure consciousness, pure love, pure beingness.
Yeah.
I think that's a deeper longing that we're all having, and focusing is a vehicle to get to that place. It's not an end in itself. It's a vehicle toward opening us to life,
Hmm.
to connecting, to intimacy with life. It's
It's interesting because I think that also offers a slightly realignment of the focusing process, that it's not about trying to kind of focus away whatever issues a person has, but instead it's more possibly a way of just being open to life itself.
life, being intimate with life. It was Dogen who said something like, enlightenment means being intimate with all things,
Mhm.
intimacy with all things,
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah.
That's a basic theme in my Dancing with Fire book, how Buddhism is really a path toward intimacy, path toward connection.
Mhm.
And suffering is created when we don't have connection.
Mhm. Now, I just want to ask, I know we're coming up to time, but I want to ask one last thing, just because it does really strike me the importance of relationship through all of your work and everything you're saying. And I'm just wondering, how did you become so, and like you're making such nuanced distinctions and stuff. How did you become so interested in relationship and all of the different kind of dynamics that happen between people?
Well, I think the simple way to answer that is because I've been so bad at it for so long.
Right.
So for me, it's like, yeah, I like people, I'm kind of a people person. I like connection. And, I wanted to get better at it. Starting with the sensitivity group was really helpful. And, you
Mhm.
know, it's a lifelong process, still working on it. I'm never going to be like have never going to be perfect at it, but we don't have to be. Perfectionism is, overrated. It's toxic.
Mhm.
So accept our imperfections too. But yeah, I'm interested in connecting, because it feels so good when, I'm present with somebody and they're looking, making eye contact and we're there with each other. It's the richest thing in life is really connecting with people. We develop friendships, we create our Sangha, in Buddhism, taking refuge in the Sangha in the community is an underrated part of the three refuges that Buddhism talks about, building connection. So, it just enriches me, and, hopefully I'm getting better and better at it, connecting with people, being kind and open and loving and yeah, it's just, the richest gift we can give ourselves and each other is the gift of presence with ourselves, with each other, connection.
Mhm.
So answering your question, but yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I grew up with a lot of shaming, like I said earlier, and relationships weren't for me. I didn't know how to have them or be in them. I was, really shy and awkward as an adolescent and in my early 20s, or still feel some awkwardness and shyness in relationship. But shyness is another gift. It's another doorway to intimacy. Just let all that be there, and so yeah, it's
Great. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you would like to say?
do we have another hour? I could go into some things.
No, but if you have a list, we could list them and maybe arrange more conversations.
I think we touched on a lot of really rich topics. I really appreciate you, Greg, and your presence and your kindness and your nuanced understanding of these things. And, I feel really comfortable talking with you about all this. I appreciate you and the gift you give to the world by doing these interviews with people. I saw one of them recently with Glenn Fleisch was really well done. And so I appreciate, everything that you're doing to help spread this awareness. And
So I'm going to pause and take that in. It's not easy. I can easily say thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's true. But it'll take me a while to really kind of let that in. But I can easily say back to you that it's always fun to connect with you.
hmm,
And I hope, yeah,
work on letting that in. Thank you.
yeah. And it would be nice if we get to see each other, maybe at a conference or something at some point.
It'd be great. Love that.
Yeah, me
Yeah, I
too.
was enjoying the connection and being with you.
Mhm. Yeah, that would be good. Okay. Thank you very much. Really, really appreciate it.
Ah, oh, well, I won't answer back too quickly, as part of me wants to do.
Mhm.
Thanks so much, and I appreciate your kindness in inviting me.
I want to just say one last thing that you said at kind of at the end was just it just kind of made a light go on about how even just the smallest little connections between people can be at least a tiny little step in healing some of that shame. There's something about the
Mm,
connection. It's like if another person wants to or lets me connect with them, I can't be totally bad.
absolutely, yeah, it helps heal that trance of unworthiness, as Tara Brach calls it.
Yeah.
Helps heal that shame, the pain of disconnection. To really let that in.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If I can mention too, if people want to follow up on my work, I have a website where I talk about my books and my articles. You can access my free articles if you go to johnamodeo.com. You don't know how to spell my name.
I will definitely put a link in the notes for the episode so people will be able to find you. Definitely.
Great, great.
Terrific. Thanks very much.
Blessings. Appreciate it.